President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, has strongly reacted to recent criticism of the bloc by the former mayor of London.
When I hear the EU being compared to the plans and projects of Adolf Hitler, I cannot remain silent. Such absurd arguments should be completely ignored if they hadn't been formulated by one of the most influential politicians of the ruling party.
Tusk said that Boris Johnson's comparison between the EU and Adolf Hitler's plan to rule the continent showed Johnson's political amnesia. The Polish politician added that the European Union does not aim to govern Europe, but serves as a mediator to boost cooperation among member states. Tusk acknowledged that there are many problems that the bloc is accused of. However, he asserted that the EU is still the most effective tool for preventing conflicts among the nations. Boris Johnson, who leads the Brexit campaign, has said that Europe is better off with nations having independent authorities. Marcus Papadopoulos is a publisher and editor of First Politics, who joins us from London. Marcus Papadopoulos, the last sentence here in our piece of news perhaps is what this is all about, in some sense, for a person like the former mayor of London, Boris Johnson, to want to lead a Brexit, and that is that he believes that the UK is better off because it will have its independence in terms of decision-making.
Well, of course, the Mayor of London, or the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, is entitled to his opinion. But it's very clear, it's abundantly clear to any objective observer of the EU referendum debate in Britain that the whole debate is of a very poor quality. Now, that's not entirely unsurprising. Because the referendum debate was always going to descend, first and foremost, into an internal Conservative Party issue. Let us not forget that strong elements within the Conservative Party are obsessed with the European Union. Obsessed so much that in the past the Conservative Party has gone to war against itself, most notably during the 1990s. John Major versus Norman Tebbit, and then John Major versus John Redwood. So what we're really seeing on our television in Britain, in our newspapers in Britain, is internal Conservative Party rivalries, bitter rivalries, being fought out in the context of the EU. And primarily we're talking about David Cameron versus Boris Johnson. But also as well, comments from the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, referring the EU to Nazi Germany or to Adolf Hitler, is really unbelievably unintelligent, unbelievably ignorant. Whatever people's views are about the EU, and I have very serious issues with it, it is not Nazi Germany. So those sort of comments from Boris Johnson and other comments from British politicians, for example, invoking memories of the First World War and the Second World War and the White Cliffs of Dover, it really demonstrates how the debate in Britain is a farce. But I'd like to qualify that, because not in Scotland. In Scotland, the Scots are having an intelligent debate about the EU, and first and foremost, they're discussing economics. But that's not the case in England. Now, how do you explain that? Well, the Scots lack the imperialism of the English. In England, it really is about patriotism, about nationalism, and you're not really hearing about economics. And of course, this EU referendum is going to cost the British taxpayer £70 million. Well, quite frankly, because of the level of debate in England, I think that's a complete and utter waste of taxpayers' money.
So are you saying that the people in the UK don't even know what they're voting for?
Oh, I think it's very clear to the average person that you talk to, for example, in London, that they really don't know what they are actually voting for. Of course, some of them are concerned about immigration and the knock-on effects of that on education in Britain, school places in Britain, and also on the National Health Service, which is completely legitimate. But then they're aware that there could be some significant economic benefits for Britain remaining in the EU. However, there is just no informed debate going on in Britain or in England. As I said, it is an internal Conservative Party issue, and I'm a journalist at Parliament, and I've observed the debate. I've spoken with politicians. In particular, I'm talking about conservative right-wing politicians in the Conservative Party, and what they're citing are things like the White Cliffs of Dover, the British fighting spirit at Dunkirk during the Second World War, and we must never submit to Brussels. That's a very, very unintelligent debate to be having, and the EU referendum is probably the most important issue facing Britain in many years. And yet, what are we hearing? We're hearing about the Dunkirk spirit in the Second World War, and we're observing bitter internal rivalries within the Conservative Party. David Cameron against Boris Johnson, and references to Nazi Germany. And only today, David Cameron was asked who would benefit if Britain was to leave the EU, and he referred in part to Vladimir Putin. Political point scoring. Let's have a discussion about economics. This is what the referendum ultimately should be about. But alas, we're not having that, and this farce is costing the British taxpayer £70 million. Let me say that again, £70 million to hold this referendum.
Thank you for that. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of First Politics from London.